All right. We are live with another experimental read. Welcome to Adult Brain. I'm Graham, one of the narrators. This is I should have had my notes up. This is an experimental read. We are in part 3, chapter 10 of Ignatius Donnelly's book, Ragnarok. The Age of Fire and Gravel. We went through part 1, the drift, which talks about the science of all this stuff, icebergs, glaciers, the drift, the ice sheet. Then part 2 is the comet, and this is part 3, the fun one, the legends. And we are in chapter 10, the fall of the clay and gravel. And next we have Arabian myths, the book of Job, and Genesis. So it's getting pretty fun. It's really amazing, all these myths that line up with the catastrophes. So I am going to share my screen and show you how the sausage is made. This is rough and raw. Like, I'm going to have to go through pronunciations and all kinds of crap. Hopefully I don't snort and cough like I usually do. This is a fairly shorter chapter, but let's get into it here. This was written by Ignatius Donnelly in 1883. I've changed up my screen, so it's a little bit different and a little hard to get used to. So, chapter 10, the fall of the clay and gravel. I trust that the reader who has followed me thus far in this argument is satisfied that the legends of mankind point unmistakably to the fact that the earth, in some remote age, before the Polynesians, red men, Europeans, and Asiatics had separated, or been developed as varieties out of one family, met with a tremendous catastrophe, that a conflagration raged over parts of its surface. I'm going to redo that. Try not to that I can make too many mistakes, but I got to be as exact as I can. That a conflagration raged over parts of its surface, that mankind took refuge in the caves of the earth, whence they afterward emerged to wander for a long time in great poverty and hardships during a period of darkness, and that finally this darkness dispersed and the sun shone again in the heavens. I do not see how the reader can avoid these conclusions. There are but two alternatives before him. He must either suppose that all this concatenation of legends is the outgrowth of a prodigious primeval lie, or he must concede that it describes some event which really happened. To adopt the theory of a great race lie, originating at the beginning of human history, is difficult, inasmuch as these legends do not tell the same story in anything like the same way, as would have been the case had they all originated in the first instance from the same mind. While we have the conflagration in some of the legends, it has been dropped out of others. In one, it is caused by the sun, in another, by the demon, in another, by the moon. In one, Phaeton produced it by driving the sun out of its course, while there are a whole body of legends in which it is the result of catching the sun in a noose. So, with the stories of the cave life, check this record level. Hopefully, it stays high enough. Check. So with the stories of the cave life. In some, men seek the caves to escape the conflagration. In others, their race began in the caves. In like manner, the age of darkness, as in some. In like manner, the age of darkness is in some cases produced by the clouds, in others by the death of the sun. Again, in tropical regions, the myth turns upon a period of terrible heat when there were neither clouds nor rain, when some demon had stolen the clouds or dragged them into his cave. While in more northern regions, the horrible age of ice and cold and snow seems to have made the most distinct impression on the memory of mankind. Check. In some of the myths, the comet is a god, in others, a demon, in others, a serpent, in others a feathered serpent, in others a dragon, in others a giant, in others a bird, in others a wolf, in others a dog, and still others a boar. The legends coincide only in these facts: the monster in the air, the heat, the fire, the cave life, the darkness, the return of the light. In everything else, they differ. Surely a falsehood springing out of one mind would have been more consistent in its parts than this. The legends seem to represent the diverging memories which separating races carried down to posterity of the same awful and impressive events. They remembered them in fragments and sections and described them as the four blind men in the Hindu story described the elephant. I'm going to redo that. That doesn't make sense, though. As they described the elephant, as the four blind men in the Hindu story described the elephant. Check. They remembered them in fragments and sections and described them as the four blind men in the Hindu story described the elephant. To one it was a tail, to another a trunk, to another a leg, to another a body. It needs to put all their stories together to make a consistent whole. We cannot understand the conflagration without the comet, or the cave life without both, or the age of darkness without something that filled the heavens with clouds, or the victory of the sun without the clouds, and the previous obscuration of the sun. If the reader takes the other alternative, that these legends are not fragments of a colossal falsehood, then he must concede that the earth, since man inhabited it, encountered a comet. No other cause or event could produce such a series of gigantic consequences as is here narrated. But one other question remains. Did the drift material come from the comet? It could have resulted from the comet in two ways. Either it was part of the comet's substance falling upon our planet at the moment of contact, or it may have been torn from the Earth itself by the force of the comet, precisely as it has been supposed that it was produced by the ice. The final solution of this question can only be reached when close and extensive examination of the drift deposits have been made to ascertain how far they are of Earth origin. And here it must be remembered that the matter which composes our Earth and the other planets and the comets was probably all cast out from the same source, the sun, and hence a uniformity runs through all of it. Humboldt says, "We are astonished at being able to touch, weigh, and chemically decompose metallic and earthly masses which belong to the outer world, to celestial space, to find in them the minerals of our native earth, making it probable, as the great Newton conjectured, that the materials which belong to one group of cosmical bodies are for the most part the same. Some aerolites are composed of finely granular tissue of olivine, augite, and labradorite blended together, as the meteoric stone found at Uvanus in the department de l'Ardèche in France. These bodies contain, for instance, crystalline substances perfectly similar to those of our Earth's crust. And in the Siberian massive meteoric iron investigated by Pallas, the olivine only differs from common olivine by the absence of nickel, which is replaced by oxide of tin. Neither is it true that all meteoric stones are of iron. Humboldt refers to the aerolites of Siena, in which the iron scarcely amounts to 2%, or the earthly aerolite of Alais, in the department of Dugard, France, which broke up in the water, clay, or lastly those from Jean-Jacques Uvanus, 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 Uvenus, Uvenas, 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 Uvenas. This is how the sausage is made. It's pronouncing things a million times. Which broke up in the water. Or lastly, Jean-Jacques. Or last. Jean-Jacques, 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 Uvenas, Jean-Jacques, Uvenas, Jean-Jacques. Where's my YouTube studio? Uh-oh, I've lost you. I've lost you. There we go. All right. Jean-Jacques. Or lastly, those from Jean-Jacques and Uranus, which contained no metallic iron. Who shall say what chemical changes may take place in remnants of the comet floating for thousands of years through space and now falling to our Earth? And who shall say that the material of all comets assumes the same form? I cannot but continue to think, however, until thorough scientific investigation disproves the theory, that the cosmical granite dust, which mixed with water became clay, and which covers so large a part of the world, we might say one half the Earth's surface of the planet, and possibly also the gravel and strain. Oh boy, that's a bad mistake. I got to go back all the way, all the way. That the cosmical granite dust, which. Yeah, this is a bad one. I got to go all the way back. And who shall say that the material of all comets assumes the same form? I cannot but. There we go. Let me do that again. Earth's surface of the planet. Where did I make that mistake? Granite dust mixed with water becomes clay. So, a part of the world, we might have half the surface of the planet, also the gravity, striated stones. That's where I messed it up. I cannot but continue to think, however, until thorough scientific investigation disproves the theory, that the cosmical granite dust, which mixed with water become clay, and which covers so part. Oh boy. I cannot but continue to think, however, until thorough scientific investigation disproves the theory, that the cosmical granite dust, which mixed with water became clay, and which covers so large a part of the world, we might say one half the Earth's surface of the planet, and possibly also the gravel and striated stones, fell to the Earth from the comet. It is a startling and tremendous conception, but we are dealing with startling and tremendous facts. Even though we dismiss the theory as impossible, we still find ourselves face to face with the question, where then did these continental masses of matter come from? I think the reader will agree with me that the theory of the glacialists, that a world enfolding ice sheet produced them, is impossible. To reiterate, they are found on the equator, where the ice sheet could not have been without ending all terrestrial life. And they are not found where the ice must have been in Siberia and northwestern America, if ice was anywhere. If neither ice nor water ground up the Earth's surface into the drift, then we must conclude that the comet so ground it up or brought the materials with it already ground up. The probability is that both of these suppositions are in part true. The comet brought down upon the Earth the clay dust and part of the gravel and boulders, while the awful force it exerted, meeting the Earth while moving at the rate of 1,000,000 miles an hour, smashed the surface rocks, tore them to pieces, ground them up, and mixed the material with its own, and deposited all together on the heated surface of the Earth, where the lower part was baked by the heat into till, or hardpan, while the rushing cyclones deposited the other material in partly stratified masses or drifts above it. And part of this in time was rearranged by the great floods, which followed the condensation of the cloud masses into rain and snow in the period of the river or Champlain drift. Nothing can be clearer than that the inhabitants of the earth believed that the stones fell from heaven, to wit, from the comet. But it would be unsafe to base a theory upon such a belief, inasmuch as stones and even fish and toads taken up by hurricanes have often fallen again in showers, and they would appear to be an uncritical population to have fallen from heaven. But it is at last clear that the fall of the stones and the clay are associated in the legends with the time of the great catastrophe. They are part of the same terrible event. I shall briefly recapitulate some of the evidence. The Matoles, an Indian tribe of Northern California. Let me double check that quickly. Matoles, Matolls. It could be Seminoles or like that. So matolls. The matolls. Check. The Matolls, an Indian tribe of Northern California, have this legend. As to the creation, they teach that a certain big man began by making the naked earth silent and bleak, with nothing of plant or animal thereon, save one Indian who roamed about in a woeful, hungry, and desolate state. Suddenly there arose a terrible whirlwind, the air grew dark and thick with dust and drifting sand, and the Indian fell upon his face in sore dread. Then there came a great calm, and the man rose and looked, and lo, all the earth was perfect and peopled. The grass and the trees were green on every plain and hill, the beasts of the field, the fowls of the air, the creeping things, the things that swim, moved everywhere in his sight. Here, as often happens, the impressive facts are remembered, but in a disarranged chronological order. There came a whirlwind thick with dust, the clay dust, and drifting sand and gravel. It left the world naked and lifeless, silent and bleak. Only one Indian remained, and he was dreadfully hungry. But after a time, all this catastrophe passed away, and the earth was once more populous and beautiful. In the Peruvian legends, Apocatequil, in the Peruvian legends, Apocatequil was the great god who saved them from the powers of darkness. He restored the light. He produced the lightning by hurling stones with his sling. The thunderbolts are small, round, smooth stones. The stone worship, which played so large a part in antiquity, was doubtless due to the belief that many of the stones of the earth had fallen from heaven. Dr. Schwartz of Berlin has shown that the lightning was associated in popular legends with the serpent. When the lightning kindles the woods, it is associated with the descent of fire from heaven. And as in popular imagination, where it falls, it scatters the thunderbolts in all directions. The flint stones, which flash when struck, were supposed to be these fragments and gave rise to the stone worship so frequent in the Old World. In Europe in old times, the boulders were called devil stones. They were supposed to have originated from the malevolent agency of man's spiritual foes. This was a reminiscence of their real source. The reader will see, page 173, that the Iroquois legends represent the great battle between the White One, the Sun, and the Dark One, the comet. The Dark One, as was wounded... The Dark One was wounded to death, and as it fled for life, the blood gushed from him at every step, and as it fell, turned into flint stones. Here we have the red clay and the gravel both represented. Among the Central Americans, the flints were associated with Hurricane Hauka. Let me double check that. Hurricane Heoka. Hurricane Heoka. Among these, Hurricane Heoka Tlaloc. Check. Among the Central Americans, the flints were associated with Hurricane Heoka and Tlaloc, the gods of storm and thunder. The thunderbolts, as elsewhere, were believed to be flints, and thus, as the emblem of the fire and the storm, this stone figures conspicuously in their myths. Tohil, the god who gave the quiches fire by shaking his sandals, was represented by a flint stone. Such a stone, in the beginning of things, fell from heaven to earth and broke into 1,600 pieces. each of which sprang up a god. This is the germ of the adoration of stones as emblems of the fecundating rains. This is why, for example, the Navajos use as their charm for rain certain long, round stones, which they think fall from the cloud when it thunders. In the Algonquin legends of Manabozho or Manaboshu or Nanaboju, the great ancestor of all the Algic tribes, the hero man. Oh, I gotta redo that. In the Algonquin, Algic. I gotta just check that. Algic. Algae. Is that an E or a C? I think it's a C. Algic. Yes, algic. All right, I had it right. My intuition on the Algonquin pronunciation is improving. In the Algonquin legends of Manabozho or Manabushu or Nanabuju, the great ancestor of the Algic tribes, the hero man god, we learn had a terrific battle with his brother Chakakapokak. Oh, now, really, I should have double checked that ahead of times. It is Chakakanapuk. 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 I'm going to have to redo that whole thing. Chakakanapuk. Chakakanapuk. That's going to be a tough one. Chakakanapuk. Thunders. Check. In the Algonquin legends of Manabozho or Manaboshu or Nanabuju, the great ancestor of all the Algic tribes, the hero man god, we learn, had a terrific battle with his brother Chakakanapuk, the flintstone, whom he broke in pieces and scattered over the land and changed his entrails into fruitful vines. The conflict was long and terrible. The face of nature was desolated as by a tornado, and the gigantic boulders and loose rocks found on the prairies are the missiles hurled by the mighty combatants. We read in the Ute legends given on page blank, Auntie, that when the magical arrow of Tawats struck the sun god full in the face, the sun was shivered into 1,000 fragments, which fell to the earth, causing a general conflagration. Here we have the same reference to matter falling on the earth from the heavens, associated with devouring fire. And we have the same sequence of events, for we learn that when all of the Tawats was consumed but the head, the tears. His tears gushed forth in a flood, which spread over the earth and extinguished the fires. The Aleuts, I'm going to double check that before I go. Aleuts. Aleutian Archipelago, Aleuts. Check. Come on. The Aleuts of the Aleutian Archipelago have a tradition that a certain old man called Iragadaka. I should have looked ahead on that one too. I have that ready. Iraq Dadak. The Aleuts of the Aleutian Archipelago have a tradition that a certain old man called Iraq Dadak. The Aleuts of the Aleutian Archipelago have a tradition that a certain old man called Dadak created men by casting stones on the earth. He flung also other stones into the air, the water, and over the land, thus making beasts, birds, and fishes. It is a general belief in many races that the stone axes and Celts fell from the heavens. In Japan, the stone arrowheads are rained from heaven by the flying spirits who shoot them. Similar beliefs are found in Brittany, in Madagascar, Ireland, Brazil, China, the Shetlands, Scotland, Portugal, etc. In the legends of Quetzalcoatl, the central figure of the Toltec mythology, we have a white man, a bearded man from an eastern land, mixed up with something more than man. He was the bird serpent, that is, the winged or flying serpent, the great snake of the air, the son of Itzcat-Mixcoatl, the white cloud serpent, the spirit of the tornado. He created the world. He was overcome by Tezcatlipoca, the spirit of the night. When he would promulgate his decrees, his herald proclaimed that from Tezcatlipoca, the hill of shouting with such a mighty voice that it could be heard 100 leagues around, the arrows which he shot transfixed great trees, the stones he threw leveled forests, and when he laid his hands on the rocks, the mark was indelible. His symbols were the bird, the serpent, the cross, and the flint. In the Aztec calendar, the sign for the age of fire is the flint. In the Chinese Encyclopedia of the Emperor Kang He, 1662, we are told, in traveling from the shores of the eastern sea toward Chelu, neither brooks nor ponds are met with in the country, although it is intersected by mountains and valleys. Nevertheless, they are found in sand very far away from the sea, oyster shells and the shells. Let's just redo that quickly. Nevertheless, what happened there? I've got 3 screens to click on to move, so let me see, where was I? Oh boy, I lost myself. Nevertheless, there it is. Nevertheless. Check. Nevertheless, there are found in the sand very far away from the sea oyster shells and the shields of crabs. The tradition of the Mongols who inhabit the country is that it has been said from time immemorial that in a remote antiquity the waters of the deluge flooded the district, and when they retired, the places where they had been made their appearance covered with sand. This is why these deserts are called the Sandy Sea, which indicates that they were not always covered with sand and gravel. In the Russian legends, a golden ship sails across the heavenly sea. It breaks into fragments which neither princes nor people can put together again, reminding one of Humpty Dumpty in the nursery song, who, when he fell from his elevated position on the wall, not all the king's horses nor all the king's men can ever make whole again. In another Russian legend, Perun, the thunder god, destroys the devils with stone hammers. On Ilya's day, the peasants offer him a roasted animal which is cut up and scattered over the fields, just as we have seen the great dragon or serpent cut to pieces and scattered over the world. Merzug. Mr. Christie found at Bu Merzug on the plateau of the Atlas in northern Africa, in a bare, deserted, stony place among the mountains, a collection of 1,500 tombs made of rude limestone slabs set up with one slab to form a roof so as to make perfect dolmens, closed chambers where the bodies were packed in. Tradition says that a wicked people lived there, and for their sins, stones were rained upon them from heaven. So they built these chambers to creep into. Interesting that is probably close to that, what's that place called? In West Africa with the circular. I can't believe I'm gapping out on the name right now. And close to the Azores. I mean, they say that Atlas and Atlantis are very similar, so that would be interesting to see where that is at. The reshot structure is what I'm thinking of. It's probably pretty close to that too, which is kind of interesting. In addition to the legend of Phaeton, already given, Ovid derived from the legends of his race another story which seems to have had reference to the same event. He says, Fable 11, after the men who came from the Tyrian nation. After the men who came from the Tyrian nation had touched the grove with ill-fated steps, and the urn let down into the water. After the men who came from the Tyrian nation had touched this grove with ill-fated steps, and the urn let down into the water made a splash, the azure dragon stretched forth his head from the deep cave and uttered dreadful hissings. We are reminded of the flying monster of Hesiod, which roared and hissed so terribly. Ovid continues, the urns dropped from their hands, and the blood left their bodies, and a sudden trembling seized their astonished limbs. He wreathes his scaly orbs in rolling spirals, and with the spring becomes twisted into mighty folds. And uprearing himself from below, the middle into the light air, he looks down upon all the grove, and is of, as large size, as if you were to look upon him entire, the serpent which separates the two bears, the constellations. He says the Phoenicians, some he kills with his sting, some with his long folds, some breathed upon by the venom of his baleful poison. Cadmus casts a huge stone, as big as a millstone, against him, but it falls harmless upon his scales, that were like a coat of mail. Then Cadmus pierced him with his spear. In his fall he crushes the forests. The blood flows from his poisonous palate and changes the color of the grass. He is slain. Then, under the advice of Pallas, Cadmus sows the earth with the dragon's teeth. Under the earth turned up, as the seeds of a future people. Afterward, the earth begins to move, and armed men rise up. They slay Cadmus, and then fight with and slay each other. This seems to be a recollection of the comet and the stones falling from heaven and upon the land, so afflicted subsequently a warlike and aggressive and quarrelsome race of men springs up. In the contest of Hercules with the Lygians on the road from Caucasus to the Hesperides, there is an attempt to explain mythically the origin of the round quartz blocks in the Lygian field of stones at the mouth of the Rhone. The Rhone. Do I do that again? Let's do that again. Lygians. There is an attempt to explain. Check. There is an attempt to explain mythically the origin of the round quartz blocks in the Lygian field of stones at the mouth of the Rhone. In the Prometheus delivered of Asclepius, Jupiter draws together a cloud and causes the district round. Couldn't do it. In the check. In the Prometheus delivered of Asclepius, Jupiter draws together a cloud and causes the district round about to be covered with a shower of round stones. The legends of Europe refer to a race buried under sand and earth. The inhabitants of Central Europe and Teutonic races who came late to England placed their mythical heroes underground in caves, in vaults beneath enchanted castles, or in mounds which open and show their buried inhabitants alive and busy about the avocations of earthly men. In Morishar, the buried race are supposed to have been buried under the sandhills, as they are in some parts of Brittany. Turning again to America, we find in the great prayer of the Aztecs to Tezcatlipoca, given on page 186 ante, many references to some material substances falling from heaven. We read, thine anger and indignation has descended upon us in these days, coming down even as stones, spears, and darts upon the wretches that inhabit the earth. Gotta redo that guy. Thine anger and indignation has descended upon us in these days, coming down even as stones, spears, and darts upon the wretches that inhabit the earth. This is the pestilence by which we are afflicted and almost destroyed. The children die, broken and dashed to pieces as against stones and a wall. Thine anger and thy indignation does it delight in hurling the stone and arrow and spear. The grinders of thy teeth, the dragon's teeth of Ovid, are employed in thy bitter whips upon the miserable of thy people. Hast thou verily determined that it utterly perish, that the peopled place became a wooded hill and a wilderness of stones? Is there to be no mercy nor pity for us until the arrows of thy fury are spent? Thine arrows and stones have sorely hurt this poor people. In the legend of the Indians of Lake Tahoe, in the legends of the Indians of Lake Tahoe, see page 168, Ante, we are told that the stars were melted by the great conflagration, and they rained down molten metal upon the earth. In the Hindu legend, see page 171, Ante, of the great battle between Rama, the sun god, and Ravana, the evil one, Rama persuaded the monkeys to help him build a bridge to the island of Lanka. And the stones which crop out through southern India are said to have been dropped by the monkey builders. In the legend of the Tupi Indians, see page 175, Ante, we are told that the god, no, we are told that god, not that the god. In the come on. In the legend of the Tupi Indians, see page 175, Ante, we are told that God swept about the fire in such a way that in some places he raised mountains and in others dug valleys. In the Bible, we have distinct references to the fall of matter from heaven. In Deuteronomy chapter 28, among the consequences which are to follow disobedience of God's will, we have the following. 22, the Lord shall smite thee with an extreme burning, and with the sword, and with blasting, and with mildew, and they shall pursue thee until thou perish. 23, and thy heaven that is over thy head shall be brass, and the earth that is under thee shall be iron. 24, the Lord shall make the rain of thy land power and dust. 24, the Lord shall make the rain of thy land powder and dust. From heaven shall it come down upon thee until thou be destroyed. 29, and thou shalt grope at noonday as the blind gropeth in darkness. Check. Check. And even that marvelous event, so much mocked at by modern thought, the standing still of the sun at the command of Joshua, may be, after all, a reminiscence of the catastrophe of the drift. In the American legends, we read that the sun stood still. In the American legends, we read that the sun stood still, and Ovid tells us that a day was lost. Who shall say what circumstances accompanied an event great enough to crack the globe itself into immense fissures? It is at least a curious fact that in Joshua, chapter 10, the standing still of the sun was accompanied by a fall of stones from heaven, by which multitudes were slain. Here is the record. 11. And it came to pass, as they fled from before Israel, and were in the going down to Beth-horon, that the Lord cast down great stones from heaven upon them unto Azekah. I double-checked that one. Let me check what it is. I think I got that wrong. Azekah. That the Lord cast down great Azekah. I better go back to the beginning of that. There were none which died. Azekah. It came to pass. Azekah. Go back to Azekah. This is what I don't like. And I click back and forth to screens. Okay. And it came to pass as they fled from before Israel and were in going. And it came to pass as they fled from before Israel and were in the going down to Beth-horon, that the Lord cast down great stones from heaven upon them unto Azekah, and they died. There were more which died with hailstones than they whom the children of Israel slew with the sword. 13. And the sun stood still, and the moon stayed, until the people had avenged themselves upon their enemies. Is not this written in the book of Jasher? So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven, and hastened not to go down about a whole day. 14. And there was no day like that before it or after it, and that the Lord hearkened unto the voice of a man, for the Lord fought for Israel. Jasher, why did I think it was Yasher? It's funny, I thought it was something, and then when it comes time to do it, my mind changes. Jasher. Why did I think it was Yasher? Oops. Let me put you back up here. For the Lord fought for Israel. The book of Jasher was, we are told, a very ancient work, long since lost. Is it not possible that a great dim memory of a terrible event was applied by tradition to the mighty captain of the Jews, just as the doings of Zeus have been attributed in the folklore of Europe to Charlemagne and Barbarossa? If the contact of Lexell's comet with the Earth would, as shown on page 84 ante, have increased the length of the sidereal year 3 hours, what effect might not a comet many times larger than the mass of the Earth have had upon what effect? I think I might be able to cut that one in half. What effect might not a comet many times larger than the mass of the Earth have had upon the revolution of the Earth? Where the heat, the conflagrations, and the tearing up of the Earth's surface caused by such an arrestment or partial slowing up of the Earth's revolution on its axis? I do not propound these questions as any part of my theory, but merely as suggestions. The American and Polynesian legends represent that the catastrophe increased the length of the days. This may mean nothing or a great deal. At least Joshua's legend may yet take its place among the scientific possibilities. But it is check. But it is in the legend of the Toltecs of Central America, as preserved in one of the sacred books of the race, the Codex Chimalpopoca, where we find the clearest and most indisputable references to the fall of gravel. See page 106 ante. The third sun, or era, is called Kia Tonatua, the son of rain, because there fell a rain of fire, all which existed burned, and there fell a rain of gravel. They also narrate that while the sandstone, which we now see scattered about, and the Tetzlontli, Amygdala died, amygdaloid, and the Tetzlontli. Oops. They also. Let's redo that guy. Check. Tetzlontli, amygdaloid, porous, basalt. They also narrate that while the sandstone which we now see scattered about, and the Tetzlontli, amygdaloid, porous, basalt, trap rocks, boiled with great tumult, there also arose the rocks of vermilion color. Now this was in the year Sitekpatl. Now this was in the year Sitekpatl. One flint, it was the day Naui Kiahudl. Now this was in the year Sitekpatl. One flint, it was the day Naui Kiahudl. Now this was in the year Sitekpatl. One flint, It was the day Naui Kiahurul, fourth reign. Now, in this day in which men were lost and destroyed in a rain of fire, they were transformed into goslings. We find also many allusions in the legends to the clay. When the Navajos climbed up from their cave, they found the earth covered with clay, into which they sank mid-leg deep. And when the water ran off it, left the whole world full of mud. In the Creek and Seminole legends, the Great Spirit made the first man in the primeval cave from the clay around him. Sanchoniathon from the other side of the world tells us in the Phoenician legends, see page 209 ante, that first came chaos, and out of chaos was generated mot, or mud. In the Mixtec American legends, see page 214 ante, we are told that in the age of darkness there was nothing but mud and slime on all the face of the earth. In the Quiche legends, we are told that the first men were destroyed by fire and pitch from heaven. In the Quiche legends, we also have many allusions to the wet and muddy condition of the earth before the returning sun dried it up. In the legends of the North American Indians, we read that the earth was covered with great heaps of ashes. Doubtless, the fine, dry powder of the clay looked like ashes before the water fell upon it. There is another curious fact to be considered in connection with these legends, that the calamity seems to have brought with it some compensating wealth. Let me redo that guy. Thanks, Rod. Appreciate that. That the calamity seems to have brought with it some compensating wealth. Thus, we find Beowulf, when destroyed by the midnight monster, rejoicing to think that his people would receive a treasure, a fortune by the monster's death. Hence, we have a whole mass of legends wherein a dragon or great serpent is associated with a precious hoard of gold or jewels. The Scythians had a saga of the sacred gold which fell burning from heaven. The ancients had also some strange fictions of silver which fell from heaven, and with which it had been attempted, under the Emperor Severus, to cover bronze coins. In Peru, the god of riches was worshipped under the image of a rattlesnake, horned and hairy, with a tail of gold. It was said to have descended from the heavens in the sight of all the people, and to have been seen by the whole army of the Inca. The Peruvians, probably in reference to this event, chose as their arms two serpents with their tails interlaced. Among the Greeks and the ancient Germans, the fiery dragon was the dispenser of riches and watches a treasure in the earth. These legends may be explained by the fact that in the Ural Mountains, in the east of Europe, in South America, in South Africa, and in other localities, the drift gravels contain gold and precious stones. The diamond is found in drift gravels alone. It is pure carbon crystallized. Man has been check. Man has been unable to reproduce it except in minute particles, nor can he tell in what laboratory of nature it has been fabricated. It is not found in situ in any of the rocks of an earth origin. Has it been formed in space? Is it an outcome of that pure carbon which the spectroscope has revealed to us as burning in some of the comets? And that's it. Here we have up next. I don't know if I can do tomorrow or Tuesday, but Wednesday, maybe tomorrow earlier. We'll see. Chapter 11, the Arabian myths, are next. This was chapter 10, the fall of gravel and clay. So thanks for watching and me recording this video and watching the sausage done. Of course, like and subscribe, all that good stuff. You can go back to our live tab for the whole rest of this book, the first 267 pages, and we'll just keep finishing it up. There was some visuals as well in the other on the other pages that were in this book. But thanks for watching and listening, and we'll see you soon. Love you.